My wife betrayed me with my best friend, so I dropped a tree that sea-rushed everything they had, literally. That morning, I stood beneath a 100-year-old pine, the kind that watched generations pass beneath its shade. One wrong cut and it would collapse the wrong way, smashing through lives it was never meant to touch. But this wasn't a mistake. This was precision, calculated, controlled, just like the betrayal that brought it all crashing down. You could say I was born with sawdust in my blood and the scent of pine in my lungs. Long before everything around here turned into condos and cul-de-sacs, this land breathed with the steady rhythm of wind through old-growth timber. And on the edge of my yard stood one of the last guardians of that forgotten time, an ancient tree that had towered over this ground for nearly 2 centuries. A giant witness, a living monument to everything we'd lost. But then came the storm. Lightning didn't just strike once, it hit 3 times. Folks always say lightning never strikes the same place twice, but nature don't care about old sayings. That tree, bless it, held on through the first hit, and even the second. But the third, it split the crown clean through. After that, I knew it was no longer a question of if it came down, but when. So I did what I always do. I measured, calculated, and planned with the care of a surgeon. Top came off first, just over 50 feet, I remember. Middle section next. The base, though, that stubborn trunk, was today's challenge. And it wasn't just about dropping wood. I had neighbors now. Robert, who'd lived here even before we did, and Miss Susan, whose house nestled downhill like it had grown there. One wrong cut, and it wouldn't just be splinters hitting the dirt, it'd be lives, lawsuits, and decades of goodwill turned to ash. You see, I wasn't always just a man selling firewood. I used to be a lumberjack, good with my hands, better with my instincts. This place used to be ours in every sense. It was quiet, wild, and honest, but things change. In 10 short years, the woods were swallowed by vinyl siding and 2-car garages. They cleared trees faster than I could count, paved the earth, and filled the silence with lawnmowers and delivery vans. The neighborhood I once knew had vanished beneath progress. And now, even the trees, especially the trees, were being made to disappear. I fought hard to keep that old pine standing, but after the storm, the county gave me permission to take it down. Under conditions so strict, you'd think I was removing a war monument. As I prepared for the final cut, something felt different in the air, like the land itself held its breath. And maybe I should have listened to that instinct. Maybe I should have known this wasn't just about wood and weather. Because while I was trying to save a piece of the past, my own home was splintering behind me. They say it takes years to grow something mighty, and only seconds to bring it crashing down. That ancient tree stood tall and silent through storms, snow, and seasons, but not through betrayal, and neither could I. The city had laid out its orders in black and white. The final trunk had to come down within 72 hours, and every last splinter of it hauled, stacked, and cleared. No excuses, no delays. They didn't care about the memories in its rings or the sweat it took to bring it down safely. Regulations didn't bend for sentiment, and neither did life. What stood before me was the last remnant of a once proud giant. 80 feet of wounded bark, its base thicker than my truck, with branches that used to stretch across the sky like a canopy of prayer. It had taken every ounce of skill I'd earned from a lifetime as a lumberjack to bring it this far. But the toughest part of this job wasn't technical, it was personal. I had dropped many trees in my time. This one, though, this one was deliberate. Not reckless, not angry, but calculated, surgical. Because when your world falls apart in secret, sometimes the only way to process it is to let something massive fall in the open. It was supposed to be just another day, another step in clearing out the wreckage left by the storm. But betrayal doesn't follow your schedule. It hijacks it. I came home that morning, still sweating from splitting timber, ready to grab my forgotten lunch. Instead, I found something I could never unsee. There they were, Lily, my wife of nearly 2 decades, and James, my brother, my blood, my so-called best friend, entwined in the very home I built with my own hands. Their laughter cut deeper than any blade I'd ever swung. They didn't flinch when I walked in, didn't panic. They smirked, as if I'd walked into their home. And just like that, the foundation cracked. Not the house, but the life within it. I didn't shout. I didn't throw punches. Instead, I reached for my old video camera, set it on the bookshelf, clicked record. Proof. It's what I needed, not just for me, but for every lie they would later try to spin. I asked them one simple question: how long? They said nothing, just shrugged, as if my pain was background noise. And that's when something inside me broke and then rebuilt itself, colder and sharper. I left the house without a word, drove out to Robert's shed where the rest of the felled tree waited, and started sharpening my chainsaw with a precision I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't sure what would fall first, my marriage, my sanity, or that massive tree, but I knew this: something had to fall. The tree, of course, had already been dying. Lightning had struck it 3 separate times, another omen folks like to ignore. The experts said the sap had all but drained out of it. Still, it looked alive on the outside, just like my marriage. And just like my marriage, its core had already been hollowed by rot. The irony wasn't lost on me. Neighbors gathered in clumps like curious birds, whispering behind paper cups and patio chairs. Conservationists had fought hard to save the tree, arguing it had 2 more centuries of life if given the right care. They didn't understand. Some things, no matter how old or towering, can't be saved once they're split down the middle. The city ruled in my favor. The judge, kind enough, stern enough, granted removal. Public hazard, he called it. But the hazard wasn't just falling branches. It was everything underneath. That's when Robert, camera in hand, wandered over. "Mind if I film this?" he asked. "It would be a shame not to capture something this monumental." I smiled faintly. "Just promise me a copy." He grinned. "You want me to get the house in the shot too? Or just the tree falling?" I looked back at the home I no longer recognized. "Get it all. The whole damn thing." Robert chuckled, but his eyes were kind. He didn't need to ask why I sounded like a man marking an ending. I revved the saw and took a long, deliberate breath. There's a silence right before the cut begins, like the world's holding its breath for what comes next. It's the kind of silence that separates who you were from who you're about to become. I angled the notch with purpose, too shallow and it could twist, too deep and I'd have no control. Same could be said for revenge. And this was more than just timber. The last cut sent the tree groaning, creaking, splintering, then crashing down with a roar that rolled through the valley like thunder made of grief. And when it landed, it didn't just crush the ground. It crushed both of their trucks, parked so perfectly side by side. Totaled. Neighbors gasped. Robert's camera shook in his hands. I didn't flinch. Didn't smile. Didn't say a word. Because sometimes the only thing left to do when someone takes an axe to your trust is to return the favor. In towns like ours, people don't just vanish. Not without stories, not without whispers that weave themselves into porch talk and barbershop buzz. But I had vanished 15 years ago, under a sky full of bad luck and worse choices. And now I was back, not to be seen. Not yet, but to see. To watch, to listen, and to make sure no one suspected the man behind the curtain was anything but a rumor. The tree outside my property line had become more than just a dying oak. It was my alibi, my stage, and my weapon. Its roots were rotting, leaning dangerously toward the county road. The city had sent letters, warnings. Even the local reporter had started sniffing around. But I hadn't touched it, until now. "Everything has a cycle," I told Robert, who stood beside me with his thermos and that knowing squint he wore like a second skin. "Things are born, they grow, and eventually they die. Some just go sooner than expected," he said quietly. We both knew I wasn't just talking about the tree. Robert had been my only confidant since my return, not because I trusted easily, but because he had seen Lily's betrayal, James's lies, and the strange way my name still made people twitch. And when I asked him to help me set the stage for what was coming, he didn't flinch. He just said, "Tell me what you need." That morning, the sky hung low like it knew something was coming. I'd spent the night preparing. Walked the perimeter, double-checked my tools, and placed a thin layer of cat litter beneath the rear tires of both James's and Lily's trucks. A subtle trick. It wouldn't stop them, but it would delay them. Long enough. Robert gave me a look as I pulled the chainsaw from the back of my truck. Still runs? Like it was waiting for this moment, I said, patting the red metal like it was an old dog I just let off the leash. You still want me to make those calls? He asked. I nodded. First the lawyer, then Emma, 20 minutes later. He raised an eyebrow. You think she'll show? Oh, she'll show, I said. She never could resist a crisis if her name might be in the papers. And Lily? She'd hear it on her way home from the community foundation meeting, the one she chaired every month like she hadn't ripped apart a man's memory with her silence. I wasn't aiming to destroy them, not yet, but I wanted them to feel the tremor before the quake. Robert walked back to his porch, quiet and slow. Give me 10 minutes to set the camera upstairs, he said, then let's get this over with. When he disappeared behind the door, I stood alone in the morning light, the chainsaw in my hand, the old oak towering above me like a monument to what was lost. Or maybe what was stolen. I took one long breath, then another, and whispered to the tree, time to fall. The engine roared to life, deafening, alive, slicing through the morning like it had a score to settle. Neighbors peeked through blinds, a dog barked across the street, and still I kept cutting, methodical and deliberate, not too fast, not too slow. Every slice measured. Because that's how I'd been living, measuring every moment since I came back. Watching the way Lily kissed James in the driveway, her smile like a blade tucked behind her lips. Watching the way James looked over his shoulder every time he got the mail, like guilt was a ghost on his heels. They didn't know I was alive. They didn't know I'd heard their wedding vows. But they would. The tree groaned, a long, aching sound like it remembered the day I planted it. Then, with a splintering crack, it leaned. The crash echoed down the street like thunder through a canyon, and in its wake, silence. Just as planned, Robert stepped out onto the porch, his camera in hand. Well, he said, you sure know how to make an entrance. I haven't even walked through the door yet, I replied, brushing sawdust from my sleeves. Back inside, I pulled out the envelope I'd sealed weeks ago, the letter addressed to Lily in my handwriting, the one she'd recognize instantly. I handed it to Robert. Leave this in the mailbox tomorrow, let her find it. What's it say? I looked out at the shattered limbs across the road. It says I'm not dead, I said, and I'm coming home. The chainsaw wasn't just a tool that morning, it was a warning bell, a thunderclap, and a reckoning all rolled into one. Its teeth, reinforced with carbide and honed to a diamond edge, weren't meant for mere lumber. They were made for trees like this. Massive, stubborn things that had outlived their welcome, rotted at the core, still standing only because no one had dared to bring them down. Until now. I had overhauled the engine myself the week before. Every bolt, every seal. I knew this machine better than I knew most people, and it was ready, just like I was. The city permit came with conditions, noise ordinances, safety checks, a muffler on the saw. Robert and I had laughed at that. Two old woodsmen who loved the guttural roar of a saw chewing through a trunk. But if they wanted me to play by the book, then fine, I'd follow every line. But so would everyone else, especially Lily, especially James. I checked the wedge placement, 3 in all, 2 on the south, 1 north. Done just right, the tree wouldn't just fall. It would spin, rotate with elegance, just like Lily used to twirl on our porch when she thought no one was watching. A pirouette, she used to call it. Funny how that word stuck with me. I made the final cut. Crack. The tree gave a groan, long and low, like it had waited 15 years to exhale. Then it tipped, slow at first, then with the full fury of gravity behind it, falling west-northwest, just like I planned. Then came the sound, a deep, twisting crunch of metal against bark, then a piercing shriek from tires and windshields giving way. Silence fell, heavy and complete, just the way I wanted it. Robert, filming from the upstairs veranda, gave me the signal, thumb and pinky, time to make the calls. I nodded. My heart thudded like a second engine. The trucks, James's and Lily's, were flattened. Gone. One still owed $32,000 on a loan. The other, Lily's pride and joy, was fully paid off and uninsured. Just state minimum coverage. Another brilliant idea from her best friend, the one with matching rims. Sometimes karma drives a bulldozer, or, in this case, falls like a tree. Inside the house, the saw was still warm in my hand as I stepped across the threshold. And there it was, the table I had carved by hand, sanded until my knuckles bled. Covered in underwear, an empty bottle of wine, and 2 lipstick-stained glasses. No coasters. Not even that basic courtesy. I dropped the saw beside it and went to the closet, pulled out her designer backpack, the one she insisted on having when she got promoted, but never used. I stuffed it with what I could find, her black dress, his shirt, some socks, a wallet. I didn't bother folding. There was no dignity left to preserve. Outside, the music blared, some top 40 track with a bass line that made the drywall hum. It was so loud they hadn't even heard the tree fall. Or maybe they just didn't care. That's when I heard them. The sounds you never forget. Soft moans, muffled giggles, bedroom echoes that didn't belong to me anymore. I walked to the door. Locked. Figures. Willie always locked it, even when there was nothing to protect. Old habits, maybe, or guilt. I fired up the saw again. The room beyond went from passion to panic in half a second. The blade sliced through the doorframe like it was warm butter. Then a kick, 1, 2, and it gave way. Inside, the world stood still. James was by the bed, stark naked, looking like he wanted to crawl out of his own skin. His eyes darted toward the window, toward me, toward the saw. Lily pulled the sheets over her chest, mascara already smudging down her cheeks. Her voice cracked into a sob, a plea, a string of excuses no one asked for. I revved the saw and stepped forward, letting it idle, letting the sound fill every crack of the house. "The door's through me," I said. "The window's all yours, Jumper." James didn't wait. He dove, right through the screen, through the glass, landing with a shriek and a crunch. From the second-floor window, I could see his ankle, bent wrong. He wasn't going far. I set the saw down on the dresser and looked back at Lily. She was crying now, full-blown hysteria. "It's not what it looks like," she gasped. "Please, you have to listen." "I've listened for 15 years," I said. "Listen to lies, to silence, to both of you pretending I never existed. You're overreacting." "Shut up, Lily." She froze. Her mouth snapped shut like I'd hit her. I never raised a hand, never needed to. But that voice, that steel I kept locked down for so long, cut sharper than any saw. "This house," I said quietly, "was mine. That truck, that money, that love I gave freely, you both buried it in this bed." "But don't." I reached into my coat and pulled out the letter. The same one I wrote when I came back to town. I dropped it onto the bed beside her. "Give that to James," I said, "when he can walk again." Then I turned to leave. Out front, the cameras were rolling, the neighbors watching. Robert gave me a thumbs up, but I barely saw it. Behind me, Lily was still crying. But I didn't look back. Not once. By the time the dust settled and the tree limbs were stacked high in Susan's barn, something in me had shifted. Lily and James, 2 people who once made up the center of my world, were now nothing more than old names in the rearview mirror. I'd given them everything: loyalty, years, my home, even the quiet hours of Sunday mornings. But betrayal has a way of cleansing, of carving out space for something new. The divorce came through quicker than anyone expected. Judge Griffin, stern, honest, and fed up, slammed his gavel with a kind of righteous finality. "This case is closed," he barked. "No appeals, no revisions, no more delays, just freedom, signed and sealed." Lily's lawyer looked like someone had knocked the wind out of him. Maybe they had, but I didn't feel smug. I felt still. I sold the house 2 weeks later. The land was too soaked in memories, too heavy with things unsaid. Instead, I'd bought a small stretch near Robert's property. Flat land, good soil, and room for a new beginning. He helped me build the porch himself. Said it was only fair considering how much firewood I'd split for his grandkids over the years. I didn't argue. Emma's case against James? Brutal. Precise. Her lawyer tore through his defense like a chainsaw through pine. Turns out, James had no legal claim to the business he'd bragged about for years. It was Emma's all along. The buildings, the trucks, even the damn Wi-Fi password. She'd just let him play pretend. Watching him walk out of court with a busted ankle and zero assets felt more poetic than anything I could have scripted. Huh. And Lily? She disappeared into her parents' guest room and hasn't shown her face in town since. Folks say she's trying to reinvent herself. Maybe even start over out west. I wish her the best, truly, but she'll have to rebuild without me. As for me, I didn't expect Jessica, the reporter, to keep coming around. Thought she'd get her scoop and vanish. But she stayed. Brought coffee, asked real questions. The kind you only ask if you want to know the whole person, not just the headlines. And little by little, I opened up. She came by last week with a tray of peach cobbler and an armful of books she thought I'd like. Said she saw something in me. Not the man with the chainsaw, she smiled. The one who kept his dignity when everything else collapsed. I didn't say much back. I just poured her some sweet tea and let the silence stretch like it does when words aren't needed. This town saw the worst of me that day. But it also saw me rise. And if you're still wondering if revenge was worth it, here's what I'll tell you. I didn't flatten their trucks because I was angry. I did it because I was done. Done letting other people write my story. Done sacrificing my peace for someone else's lies. Now, I spend my days rebuilding what matters. Friendships, trust, and a little raised garden bed Jessica and I are planning out back. Funny how healing can sneak in when the noise dies down. There's no grand finish, no final blow, just quiet mornings, clean air, and a future that finally belongs to me. And that, friends, is more than enough. Before you go, take a moment to breathe this in. Because maybe, just maybe, you saw a part of yourself in Jonathan's journey. Maybe you've stood where he stood, staring at the wreckage of something you once trusted, wondering if you'll ever feel whole again. If this story spoke to you even just a little, hit that like button to let us know. It helps more than you think. And if you've ever had to rebuild after betrayal or found unexpected strength in the middle of chaos, we'd love to hear your story. Drop a comment below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read tonight. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real, raw, and unforgettable stories like this one. We've got more tales coming, some that'll break your heart and others that just might put it back together. And you can lose everything and still come out stronger. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next story.